The enormous alien ship appeared suddenly in Earth's orbit on a Tuesday morning. It hovered silently above the planet for 3 days before making contact. When the aliens finally spoke, they called themselves the Vashnar. "We come in peace," the Vashnar ambassador said through the translator. His tall, slender form towered over the humans gathered in the United Nations chamber. His skin had a bluish tint that shimmered under the lights. "We wish to share knowledge and form an alliance with your young species." World leaders nodded and smiled. Everyone felt relieved. First contact had gone smoothly. That changed when the Vashnar revealed their gift. "We present to you a token of our goodwill," the ambassador announced 1 week later. He gestured toward the screens showing a massive structure being towed into lunar orbit by smaller Vashnar vessels. The structure was enormous, nearly 2 miles long and shaped like an elongated diamond. Its surface was dull gray with sections that appeared damaged or decayed. It looked ancient. "This vessel belonged to a civilization long extinct," the ambassador explained. "We have no use for it, but perhaps your people might find it educational." His mouth curved into what might have been a smile, but his eyes remained cold. Major Frank Collins watched from the back of the room, arms crossed over his chest. As head of the United Nations Space Command Security Division, he didn't trust the sudden appearance of aliens bearing gifts. "They're giving us their garbage," he muttered to himself. 3 days later, Collins stood in a briefing room at Lunar Base Alpha. A team of 20 specialists had gathered around him, scientists, engineers, and military personnel chosen to be the first humans to board the alien gift. "Our mission is simple," Collins said, pointing to the holographic display of the massive vessel. "We enter, we explore, we document everything. No risks, no heroics. We don't touch anything we don't understand, which will probably be everything." Dr. Olivia Grant raised her hand. With dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing, she was the foremost expert in theoretical alien technology, a field that had existed for only 8 days. "Major Collins, preliminary scans show no power signatures or life support system," she said. "The structure appears completely dead. We'll need to bring our own air and power supplies." Collins nodded. "That's why we're treating this as a deep space operation. Full suits, tethers, buddy system at all times." The team boarded 3 separate shuttles for the journey from Lunar Base Alpha to the alien structure. As they approached, Collins stared out the viewport at their destination. Up close, the vessel looked even worse, covered in impact craters and strange markings that might have been writing or just damage from thousands of years drifting through space. "It's huge," whispered Lieutenant Ben Simmons, the shuttle pilot. "Makes our biggest ships look like toys." Collins said nothing. Something about this gift felt wrong. Why would advanced aliens give humans something so apparently useless? The shuttles docked at what seemed to be an entry point, a massive tear in the hull that had been crudely adapted with Vashnar technology to create an airlock. The team assembled in their spacesuits, equipment ready. "Remember, we stay together," Collins said over the comm system. "Dr. Grant, you're with me." They entered through the airlock into darkness. Their helmet lights cut through the blackness, revealing a cavernous space that stretched beyond their beams. The air was completely absent, a perfect vacuum preserved. For who knew how long? "This main chamber is enormous," Dr. Grant said, her voice filled with awe despite the static of the comm. "The architecture doesn't match anything in the Vashnar ship designs they've shown us." Collins directed his light upward. The ceiling disappeared into darkness hundreds of feet above. The walls were covered with intricate patterns that might have been decorative or functional, impossible to tell. "Fan out in teams," Collins ordered. "Map as we go." For hours they explored the outer chambers of the vessel. They found no technology, no control systems, nothing that would indicate how the ship had ever functioned. It seemed stripped bare of anything useful. "It's empty," Engineer Peter Wolf said, disappointment clear in his voice. "Just a shell." Dr. Grant disagreed. "Not empty, dormant. Look at these wall patterns. They're not random. They follow mathematical sequences." She ran her gloved hand over a section of wall. "There's purpose here." Collins wasn't convinced. After 6 hours of exploration, They had found nothing but empty chambers and mysterious patterns. No engines, no weapons, no controls, just an empty hull. The team gathered back at the entry point for debriefing. "It's a joke," Collins said flatly. "They gave us space junk, a floating coffin." Dr. Grant shook her head. "I don't think so, Major. The design is too intentional. Everything has purpose even if we can't see it yet." As they prepared to return to their shuttles, a message came through from Earth. The Vashnar ambassador requested a progress report on their exploration of the gift. Collins composed himself before answering the video call. The ambassador's face appeared on the small screen in Collins' helmet. "We are grateful for your generous gift," Collins said carefully. "We have much to learn from it." The ambassador's expression shifted slightly, a twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, I imagine you do. It should keep your species occupied for quite some time." After the call ended, Collins turned to Dr. Grant. "Did you hear that? They're laughing at us." Grant nodded slowly. "This isn't a gift of friendship. It's a statement." "A statement of what?" asked Lieutenant Simmons. "Superiority," Collins answered. "They're showing us how advanced they are by giving us something we can barely understand." Back on the lunar base that evening, Collins sat with Dr. Grant in the observation lounge, staring at the massive alien structure floating against the blackness of space. In Vashnar's first communication, they referred to us as a young species, Grant said. "What if this is some kind of test or a joke?" Collins considered this. "Either way, I don't like being toyed with." Unknown to the humans aboard the Vashnar diplomatic vessel, the ambassador was meeting with his council. "The humans have begun examining our gift," he said, amusement in his voice. "They crawl through it like insects, understanding nothing." Another Vashnar, taller than the rest, laughed. "Did they realize it's completely useless to them?" "Not yet," the ambassador replied. "But they will, and when they do, they will understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy." A third Vashnar spoke up. "Was it wise to give them the precursor vessel? Even inoperative, it contains advanced principles." The ambassador waved away the concern. "They lack the knowledge to recognize what they're seeing, let alone harness it. A primitive species cannot leap 1,000 generations of scientific development. The vessel will remain a mystery to them, a reminder of how far they have to go before they can join the galactic community as equals. What the Vashnar didn't account for was human determination and ingenuity." While they laughed, Dr. Grant stayed late in her lab, analyzing the data collected from their first expedition. Just before midnight, she noticed something unusual in the spectrographic analysis of the vessel's hull material. She immediately called Major Collins. "You need to see this," she said when he arrived, pointing to her screen. "The hull isn't just metal. It reacts to specific electromagnetic frequencies. It's subtle, but it's there." Collins leaned closer. "What does it mean?" Dr. Grant's eyes shone with excitement. "It means that ship isn't dead. It's waiting." 3 months passed since the Vashnar gifted the enormous vessel to humanity. Earth governments pooled their resources to establish a permanent research base inside the ship. They named it Phoenix, a symbol of hope that something useful might rise from the seemingly dead structure. Major Frank Collins oversaw security operations from a command center built in what they assumed was the ship's main hall. Dozens of scientists and engineers worked around the clock, studying every inch of the ancient vessel. "Any progress?" Collins asked as Dr. Olivia Grant entered the command center. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept much. "Some," she said, placing her tablet on the table. "We've mapped about 20% of the interior. It's like a maze in the lower sections." Collins nodded. Earth authorities were growing impatient. The Vashnar maintained a small diplomatic outpost near Jupiter, occasionally requesting updates on humanity's study of their generous gift. Each time, their thinly veiled amusement was clear. "We need a breakthrough," Collins said. "Something to show for all this effort." As if on cue, Chief Engineer Alan Powell burst into the room. His normally neat uniform was wrinkled, and his eyes were wide with excitement. You both need to see this, he said, breathing hard. Now. They followed Powell through a series of corridors to a small lab he had set up in a corner of the ship. Inside, a section of the vessel's hull material was suspended in a testing apparatus. Watch, Powell said. He adjusted some controls and a beam of radiation hit the material. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metal began to shimmer and partially fade, becoming almost transparent. What are we looking at? Collins asked. The hull reacts to specific radiation frequencies, Powell explained. But it's not just changing color or heating up. It's actually altering its quantum state, becoming something else entirely. Dr. Grant moved closer to the sample. How did you discover this? I was running basic tests on various frequencies. Most did nothing, but this specific band causes the reaction. Powell looked like a child who had found a hidden treasure. This isn't any metal we've ever encountered. It's programmable matter. Meaning? Collins asked. Meaning, Dr. Grant said slowly, that the entire ship could potentially reconfigure itself at the atomic level. If we could control it? Powell nodded eagerly. Exactly. This isn't just a ship. It's the most advanced technology we've ever seen. The Vashnar either didn't know or didn't tell us. Collins stared at the shimmering metal. Can we use it? Not yet, Powell admitted. We've only triggered the reaction. We don't know how to control it. As they discussed possibilities, Lieutenant Kate Miller arrived. She had been exploring the ship's lower chambers for weeks. I think I found something important, she said. She opened her own tablet, showing a three-dimensional map of the vessel's internal structure. Look at these damage patterns throughout the ship. At first, they seem random, but they're not. She highlighted sections of the map. These aren't random damages, they follow mathematical patterns consistent with wave propagation. Dr. Grant looked skeptical. You think the damage is intentional? Not exactly, Miller said. I think the ship was designed to channel energy in specific patterns. The damage shows where that energy flowed most strongly. Powell's eyes widened. Like circuits in a giant computer. Or weapon, Collins added. Miller nodded. The entire ship could be one massive energy channeling system. The four of them stared at each other as the implications sank in. We need to keep this quiet, Collins finally said. The Vashnar can't know what we've discovered. That evening they met in Collins's private quarters to discuss their findings away from potential monitoring. Let's combine what we know, Dr. Grant said. The hull material can change its properties when exposed to specific radiation. The internal architecture seems designed to channel energy in complex patterns. Powell paced the small room. What if the ship isn't broken or stripped of technology? What if we're looking at it wrong? Explain, Collins said. What if the entire structure is the technology? Powell gestured excitedly. Not a ship that contains technology, but a single, massive technological construct. The Vashnar might not even understand what it is because their technology evolved differently. Miller nodded slowly. That would explain why there are no obvious control systems or power sources. The whole structure works together. But what does it do? Collins asked. Dr. Grant had been quiet, thinking. The patterns Lieutenant Miller found suggest energy amplification. If the hull can change states and channel energy, this could be a weapon. Something that manipulates space itself. Collins leaned forward. You're saying we have a super weapon? Potentially, Grant cautioned. If we can figure out how to power it and control it. That's a big if. We need more resources, Powell said. More specialized equipment. Collins nodded. I'll contact Earth Command. This project just became top priority. 2 days later, Collins stood before a secure video link to Earth's Unified Defense Council. He carefully explained their discoveries, emphasizing both the potential and the challenges. The vessel isn't dead or useless, he concluded. It may be the most powerful technology ever discovered. We believe it was built by a civilization far more advanced than even the Vashnar. They either don't recognize what they gave us or they didn't expect us to figure it out. What do you need? Asked the council chair. Everything, Collins replied. Top scientists, advanced equipment, unlimited power supply, and complete secrecy. The Vashnar can't know. The council discussed briefly, then agreed. Project Phoenix received unlimited funding and priority status. Meanwhile, aboard the Vashnar outpost near Jupiter, Ambassador Krell received his regular report on human activities. They continue to study the ancient vessel, his aide reported. They've established a permanent base inside it and brought in more researchers. Krell made a sound of amusement. They are persistent, if nothing else. Have they made any progress? None that our sensors detect. They appear to be cataloging the internal structure and testing hull materials. Basic research. As expected, Krell said. Their primitive science cannot possibly comprehend precursor technology. It would be like giving Stone Age humans a quantum computer. Should we continue observation? The aide asked. Yes, but minimal resources. They pose no threat. Krell turned away dismissively. The gift serves its purpose, keeping them occupied while we prepare for the next phase. Back on the Phoenix, the human team expanded rapidly. Hundreds of Earth's best minds joined the project, all sworn to secrecy. They were told they were studying alien technology, but only Colin's core team knew the full potential of what they had discovered. Powell and Dr. Grant worked tirelessly with the new arrivals, testing theories and developing new instruments to interact with the ship's unusual properties. 1 month later, they achieved their first major breakthrough. In a heavily shielded chamber, they managed to activate a small section of the hull, causing it to generate a localized field that altered the properties of light passing through it. Dr. Grant rushed to Colin's office with the data. We did it, she said, her face flushed with excitement. It's working. Colin studied the readings. Can we scale it up? Eventually. We're just beginning to understand the principles involved. Collins nodded slowly. Good work. Keep it quiet. If the Vashnar realize what we've discovered, they'd take it back, Dr. Grant finished. I know. Their floating coffin was showing signs of life. Now they just needed to resurrect it fully before the Vashnar discovered the truth. The race was on. 6 months into Project Phoenix, the research base inside the ancient vessel buzzed with activity. Over 500 specialists now worked in shifts, slowly bringing the dormant ship back to life. Earth governments poured resources into the project, recognizing its potential importance. Major Frank Collins stood in the newly established control center, surrounded by screens showing different sections of the ship. Progress reports flowed in constantly as teams made new discoveries. Major, you need to see this, Dr. Olivia Grant called from her station. We've translated some of the markings found in the lower chambers. Collins joined her at her workstation. What do they tell us? They're not just decorative patterns, they're a form of data storage, she explained, pointing to symbols on her screen. Based on our analysis, this vessel was created by a species called the Precursors. They fought a war against aggressive expansionists long ago. The Vashnar? Collins asked. No, someone else. The records are incomplete. But the Precursors built this ship as a defensive weapon. She paused, choosing her words carefully. A very powerful defensive weapon. Collins processed this information. The Vashnar gave us a superweapon without knowing it? I think they knew it was a weapon but didn't understand how it worked, Dr. Grant said. Their technology developed along different lines. To them, it probably looked like a broken relic. Their conversation was interrupted by Chief Engineer Powell, who rushed in looking both excited and concerned. We've got a problem, he announced. We activated another section of the hull matrix and it produced an energy signature that our shields couldn't completely contain. The Vashnar might have detected it. Collins frowned. How powerful was the signature? Strong enough to register, on sensors several million miles away, Powell admitted. But brief. It lasted only a few seconds. Prepare for visitors, Collins decided. If they detected it, they'll come to investigate. We need to be ready. 3 days later, a Vashnar diplomatic shuttle requested permission to dock with Phoenix. The message cited routine cultural exchange as the reason for the visit, but Collins knew better. They're suspicious, he told his core team. We need to keep them from discovering what we've learned. Lieutenant Kate Miller suggested a plan. We show them exactly what they expect to see. Humans fumbling with technology beyond their understanding. The team quickly prepared. They covered advanced equipment and rearranged research stations to hide progress. They briefed all personnel on what to say and what to show the visitors. Captain Heather Jones, a diplomatic officer with combat training, was chosen to lead the tour for the Vashnar. She practiced appearing slightly uncomfortable and overly respectful when discussing the vessel. When the Vashnar delegation arrived, led by Ambassador Krell himself, Jones greeted them with rehearsed awe and gratitude. "We are honored by your visit, Ambassador," she said, bowing slightly. "We're eager to show you how we've been studying your generous gift." Krell's tall form towered over her, his blue-tinted skin reflecting the artificial lights. "We are curious about your progress," he said, his translator conveying the words but not hiding the condescension in his tone. Jones led the delegation through carefully selected areas of the ship. In one chamber, researchers had set up what appeared to be a primitive attempt to analyze the hull material, much less advanced than their actual testing facilities hidden elsewhere. "We believe the material might be some form of advanced alloy," Jones explained, sounding uncertain. "We've run basic tests but haven't determined its composition." In another area, they had established what looked like a religious shrine, with the ship's symbols displayed reverently on walls. "Some of our people see the vessel as having spiritual significance," Jones explained. "They study the symbols as religious texts." Krell seemed amused by this. Fascinating how primitive species often confuse advanced technology with divine power. Jones pretended not to understand the insult. "Yes, we have much to learn." The tour continued for several hours. In hidden chambers not on the tour route, Collins and his team monitored the Vashnar through security systems, making sure they didn't see anything important. At one point, Krell asked about an energy reading their outpost had detected. "We detected an unusual energy spike from this vessel 3 days ago," he said casually. "Do you know what might have caused it?" Jones was prepared for this question. "Yes, unfortunately. We had an accident with our power generators. One of our scientists was trying to use our energy to activate what we thought might be a control panel." She looked embarrassed. "It overloaded and damaged some of our equipment. We're still repairing it." Krell studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Be careful with energies you don't understand, Captain Jones. You could harm yourselves." "Thank you for your concern, Ambassador," Jones replied humbly. After the tour, Krell met with his aides in the privacy of their shuttle. "What did you observe?" he asked. "They are exactly as we expected," one aide replied. "Primitive attempts at research, religious awe, technical mistakes. They understand nothing of the vessel's true nature." Krell seemed satisfied. "Good. They pose no threat to our plans. The gift continues to serve its purpose, occupying their attention while we prepare." After the Vashnar departed, the Phoenix team gathered in the secure command center. "They bought it," Captain Jones reported. "Ambassador Krell thinks we're incompetent." Collins nodded with satisfaction. "Excellent work. Now we can return to the real research." Powell spoke up. "While they were here, my team made a breakthrough with the propulsion system. We think we can move the vessel under its own power." Everyone turned to stare at him. "You're saying we can fly this thing?" Collins asked. "In theory, yes. The system uses principles we're just beginning to understand. Something like gravitational manipulation. It would be limited to sublight speeds until we fully comprehend the space-time mechanics involved." Dr. Grant was already thinking ahead. "If we can move it, we can better defend it. The lunar orbit is too exposed," Collins agreed. "How soon can we test the propulsion?" 2 weeks for a small-scale test, Powell estimated. Maybe a month before we could actually move the entire vessel. "Make it a priority," Collins ordered. "I want this ship mobile as soon as possible." What none of them realized was that a small surveillance device had been left behind by the Vashnar, hidden in an obscure corner of the tour route. It recorded their conversation and transmitted the data back to the Vashnar outpost near Jupiter. Ambassador Krell was about to retire for the night when his aide rushed in with the transmission. "Impossible," Krell muttered after viewing it. "They couldn't have progressed so quickly." The surveillance device confirms it, his aide said. They deceived us during the tour. They understand more than they revealed. Krell's expression darkened. This changes our timeline. Contact the home fleet. Tell them we need to accelerate our plans. He stared at the image of the ancient vessel on his screen. The humans are more resourceful than we anticipated. Back on Phoenix, the human team celebrated their successful deception, unaware that their secret was already compromised. They worked with renewed energy, pushing the limits of their understanding to bring the ancient weapon back to life. In 2 weeks, just as Powell had promised, they conducted the first test of the propulsion system. A small section of the ship's hull began to glow with soft blue light as energy flowed through pathways that had been dormant for millennia. The massive vessel shuddered slightly, then rose 1 meter from its moorings before settling back down. It wasn't much, but it was enough to prove the concept the Phoenix could fly again. 1 month after the successful propulsion test, Earth's orbital sensors detected movement. A massive Vashnar fleet had entered the solar system, much larger than their previous diplomatic vessels. Over 50 warships approached Earth's orbit, their weapons systems fully active. Inside the Phoenix, now stationed in a hidden orbit behind Mars, Major Collins called an emergency meeting with his command team. "It's happening," he announced, displaying the sensor data on the main screen. "The Vashnar are making their move." Dr. Grant studied the fleet formation. "They're not even trying to hide their intentions. This is an invasion force." "We knew this might happen," Collins said grimly. "They've probably been planning this since before they gave us the gift. The question is, are we ready to respond?" Powell shook his head. "Not completely. We've made progress with the ship's systems, but we still don't fully understand its defensive capabilities." Lieutenant Miller joined the conversation. "Based on our latest tests, we believe the ship can generate a defensive field that disrupts energy weapons. But powering such a system would require more energy than we can currently produce." Collins considered their options. "How long before the Vashnar reach Earth?" "At their current speed, 3 days, Captain Jones reported. "Then we have 3 days to solve the power problem," Collins decided. The team dispersed to their stations working with renewed urgency. Earth's conventional defenses were mobilized, but everyone knew they stood little chance against the advanced Vashnar technology. The next day, the Vashnar fleet halted just beyond the moon's orbit. A transmission was broadcast worldwide. Ambassador Krell's face appeared on screens across Earth and aboard the Phoenix. "People of Earth," he began, his voice translated into all major languages. "We have observed your progress with interest. Your species has shown unexpected resourcefulness." His tone hardened. "However, you have also demonstrated deception. The gift we provided was meant to gauge your technological readiness. You have failed this test." The ambassador's eyes narrowed. "The vessel you call Phoenix was never yours to command. It belongs to the Galactic Order, of which the Vashnar are the appointed guardians. Your attempts to activate it constitute a breach of cosmic law." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "We offer you one opportunity. Surrender the vessel and accept Vashnar authority over your planet. In return, we will guide your species toward proper development. Refuse, and we will be forced to take action." Earth's unified government requested time to consider the ultimatum. The Vashnar granted them 24 hours. In an emergency session of the United Nations Space Command, Collins and his team presented their findings. The Vashnar never intended the gift as a gesture of friendship, Collins explained to the assembled leaders. It was a distraction, keeping us occupied while they positioned their forces. "Can the Phoenix defend us?" asked the Secretary General. Dr. Grant stepped forward. "Potentially. Our research indicates the vessel was designed to create localized disruptions in spacetime. These disruptions could neutralize Vashnar weapons and possibly their ships. But there's a problem," Powell continued the explanation. "The power requirements are enormous. We've calculated that we would need at least 10 times the energy our current global grid can produce." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Earth couldn't power the weapon that might save it. Then Lieutenant Miller spoke up. What about Jupiter? All eyes turned to her. Jupiter generates massive amounts of electromagnetic energy, she explained. If we could harness it even temporarily, it might be enough to power the Phoenix's primary systems. How would we do that? Collins asked. Powell thought for a moment. We've been developing energy collectors based on the precursor technology. Theoretically, we could place them in Jupiter's orbit, channel the energy through a series of relay stations. Could it work? The Secretary General asked. Dr. Grant nodded slowly. It's possible. Risky, but possible. The world leaders debated briefly before authorizing the Jupiter operation. It was a desperate plan, but they had run out of alternatives. As engineers rushed to construct the required equipment, Collins prepared the Phoenix for its first real mission. The ship had been fully crewed, with hand-picked personnel, trained, as best as possible on the still mysterious systems. Captain Jones approached Collins as he reviewed final preparations. The Vashnar will notice when we move toward Jupiter, she warned. By then it won't matter, Collins replied. They already plan to attack. Our only chance is to complete the operation before they can stop us. The 24-hour deadline expired. The Vashnar received no formal response from Earth. Ambassador Krell, taking this as defiance, ordered the fleet to advance. As Vashnar warships moved toward Earth, the Phoenix emerged from its hiding place behind Mars. Its engines, now partially functional, propelled it not toward Earth but toward Jupiter. Aboard his command ship, Krell received urgent reports about the Phoenix's movement. They're fleeing? He asked, surprised by the vessel's trajectory. No, Ambassador, his tactical officer replied. They appear to be heading toward Jupiter. Krell considered this unexpected development. Divert 2 cruisers to pursue and capture the vessel. The main fleet will continue to Earth. As the Vashnar fleet split, with most ships continuing toward Earth and 2 powerful cruisers pursuing the Phoenix, Earth's conventional defenses engaged the enemy. Orbital platforms and spacecraft launched everything they had against the alien armada, but Vashnar shields easily absorbed the attacks. The battle for Earth began. Vashnar weapons targeted military installations and defense systems first, causing massive damage but avoiding population centers. Their strategy was clear: disable resistance without destroying what they came to conquer. Meanwhile, the Phoenix raced toward Jupiter, pushing its newly restored engines to their limits. The 2 Vashnar cruisers followed, slowly gaining ground. They're closing the gap, Miller reported from her tactical station aboard Phoenix. Estimated interception in 40 minutes. That's cutting it close, Collins muttered. He turned to Powell. Status of the energy collectors? Ready for deployment, the engineer confirmed. We'll need 20 minutes in Jupiter's orbit to establish the collection array. Collins did the math. If the Vashnar intercepted them before they reached Jupiter, the plan would fail. Earth would fall. Can we go any faster? He asked. Powell shook his head. Not without better understanding the propulsion system. We're already pushing beyond safe limits. Collins made a decision. Lieutenant Miller, prepare our defensive systems. If we can't outrun them, we'll have to fight. Miller looked uncertain. Sir, our weapons are experimental at best. We've never tested them against Vashnar shields. Then this will be our test, Collins replied grimly. As the chase continued toward Jupiter, Earth's defenses began to fail. Vashnar ships methodically destroyed military targets across the planet. News of the devastation reached the Phoenix, adding urgency to their mission. We're approaching Jupiter's orbit, the navigation officer announced. Vashnar cruisers will be in weapons range in 12 minutes. Collins stood at the command center, watching as the massive gas giant filled their view screen. Deploy the collectors. Start the power-up sequence. We've got one shot at this. The Phoenix released a series of devices into Jupiter's orbit. They immediately began to unfold, revealing complex arrays of technology based on the precursor design principles they had learned aboard the lead Vashnar cruiser. The commander watched with curiosity. What are they doing? His science officer studied the readings. They appear to be deploying some kind of collection devices. Unusual design. Destroy them, the commander ordered. Whatever they're planning, stop it now. The Vashnar cruisers opened fire. Energy beams lanced toward the Phoenix and its deployed collectors. The fate of Earth hung in the balance. Energy beams from the Vashnar cruisers streaked toward the Phoenix and its deployed collectors in Jupiter's orbit. At the last possible moment, the ancient vessel's hull shimmered, activating a partial defensive field that absorbed most of the woe. Attack. The ship shuddered violently but remained intact. Minimal damage, Lieutenant Miller reported from her tactical station. The hull's defensive properties activated automatically. It's like the ship is waking up. How much longer for the collectors? Collins asked, gripping his command chair as another blast rocked the vessel. Chief Engineer Powell monitored the energy readings with intense focus. Collection at 30% and rising. We need at least 80% to power the main systems. The SEO. Vashnar cruisers continued their attack, moving closer to improve accuracy. Their weapons fire became more intense, each blast taxing the Phoenix's emerging defenses. Find me something to shoot back with, Collins ordered. Dr. Grant worked frantically at her station. I think I've identified a weapons array, activating now. A section of the Phoenix's hull reconfigured, forming what looked like a series of crystalline spikes. Energy pulsed through them, then discharged in a wave that spread outward. It wasn't a conventional beam or missile, but a ripple in space itself. The wave hit the lead Vashnar cruiser. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the cruiser's engines flickered and died. It drifted, powerless. What did we just do? Collins asked, staring at the disabled enemy ship. The wave disrupted their energy systems, Dr. Grant explained, sounding surprised herself. It's temporary but effective. Target the second cruiser, Collins ordered. Before they could fire again, the second Vashnar vessel launched a barrage of attacks. Several collectors were destroyed, vaporized by direct hits. Collection network damaged, Powell reported. Rate reduced to 50%. We need more time. On Earth, the situation grew desperate. Vashnar ships methodically disabled defense systems worldwide. Major cities were surrounded by alien vessels, their weapons aimed at population centers. The message was clear: surrender or face destruction. Ambassador Krell broadcast another message from his command ship. Your defiance is futile. The vessel you call Phoenix cannot save you. Surrender now, or we will demonstrate our power on your major cities. Earth's leaders faced an impossible choice. Their conventional weapons had proven useless against Vashnar. Shields. Reports of the Phoenix's mission to Jupiter offered the only hope, but time was running out. Back at Jupiter, the Phoenix continued its desperate plan. The remaining collectors glowed brightly, drawing enormous energy from the gas giant's electromagnetic field. Collection at 65%, Powell announced. The second cruiser is moving to attack position. Collins made a quick decision. Divert power from life support to the weapons array. Hit them again before they can fire. The Phoenix pulsed once more. The second cruiser tried to evade, but the spatial wave caught its stern. Its weapons went offline, though its engines remained functional. They're calling for reinforcements, Miller warned, intercepting Vashnar communications. 3 more ships are breaking off from Earth to assist. Powell looked up from his station. We need 10 more minutes to reach minimum power threshold. We might not have 10 minutes, Collins replied. He turned to Dr. Grant. Is there any way to accelerate the process? Dr. Grant hesitated, then nodded. One possibility. The collectors are currently working independently. If we link them into a single network and create a resonance pattern based on Jupiter's magnetic field, we might amplify the collection rate. Would that be stable? Powell asked, concerned. No, Grant admitted. It would likely destroy the collectors after one massive energy surge, but it might give us what we need. Collins didn't hesitate. Do it. As Grant and Powell reconfigured the collectors, the disabled Vashnar cruiser began to restore its systems. Its weapons came back online, targeting the Phoenix once more. Incoming fire, Miller warned. The Phoenix shook under renewed assault. Damage reports flowed in from throughout the ship as systems failed and hull breaches occurred in multiple sections. Collection network reconfigured, Grant announced. Initiating resonance pattern now. The remaining collectors began to pulse in a synchronized rhythm. The energy flow increased dramatically, surging into the Phoenix through hastily established conduits. The ancient vessel's hull glowed with increasing brilliance as power flowed through pathways dormant for millennia. Power levels rising beyond predicted parameters, Powell reported, his voice mixing awe and alarm. The ship is accepting the energy and I think it's amplifying it somehow. The Phoenix hummed with power. Throughout the vessel, systems long dormant activated spontaneously. Symbols flickered across control surfaces, and the entire structure seemed to vibrate with anticipation. We've reached threshold, Powell announced. Main systems are powering up. Collins took a deep breath. Activate the primary defense array. Dr. Grant pressed her hand against a pulsing section of the control panel. The Phoenix responded immediately. The ship's entire hull began to reconfigure, patterns shifting across its surface in waves. Energy collected from Jupiter coursed through the vessel, building to impossible levels. Then, the Phoenix released it. A sphere of distorted space expanded outward from the ship, growing rapidly. It wasn't energy in any conventional sense. It was a manipulation of space-time itself. The sphere engulfed the nearby Vashnar cruisers, then continued to expand. Inside the sphere, time slowed dramatically. The Vashnar ships appeared to freeze in place, their weapon fire suspended mid-flight, crews experiencing mere microseconds while minutes passed outside. It worked, Grant whispered, staring at the readings. We've created a localized temporal distortion field. Can we extend it to Earth? Collins asked. Powell checked his instruments. The Jupiter collectors are burning out, but we've stored enough energy for one more expansion. It won't last forever, maybe a few hours at most. That's all we need, Collins said. Take us to Earth, maximum speed. The Phoenix turned away from Jupiter, its engines pulsing with new power. It accelerated to speeds beyond anything humans had achieved before, crossing the vast distance to Earth in minutes rather than days. As they approached their home planet, they saw the Vashnar fleet surrounding Earth, weapons aimed at major cities. Ambassador Krell's ultimatum had expired, and the invasion had begun. Prepare to expand the temporal field, Collins ordered. Target the entire Vashnar fleet. The Phoenix positioned itself above Earth. With its remaining power, it generated another space-time distortion, far larger than the first. The field expanded to encompass the entire Vashnar fleet, freezing them in the same temporal bubble that had captured the cruisers near Jupiter. Across Earth, people watched in awe as the attacking alien ships suddenly stopped moving. Weapon fire halted mid-beam. The Vashnar threat, seemingly unstoppable moments before, was suspended in time. In the days that followed, Earth mobilized every resource to prepare for when the temporal field would collapse. They studied the frozen Vashnar ships, developed countermeasures against their weapons, and established a unified defense strategy. 1 week after the Phoenix's return, Major Collins addressed the United Nations. The ship hovered visible in the sky above the assembly, a constant reminder of humanity's unexpected salvation. The Vashnar thought they handed us a useless relic, Collins said, a floating coffin to distract us while they prepared for invasion. Instead, we found our greatest teacher. He gestured to Dr. Grant, Powell, and the rest of his team standing beside him. These people saw potential where the Vashnar saw only trash. They recognized patterns where others saw random damage. They found life in what was thought dead. Dr. Grant took over the briefing. The precursor vessel contains technology centuries beyond anything we've developed. But it's not just a weapon. It's a gateway to understanding principles that will transform human civilization, energy production, medicine, transportation. What the Vashnar gave us as a joke will become the foundation of our future. Powell added, we estimate the temporal field will collapse in approximately 1 month. By then we'll be ready. The Phoenix has shared only a fraction of its secrets so far. The Secretary General asked the question on everyone's mind. And the Vashnar, what happens when they're free? Collins smiled grimly. they'll find a very different humanity waiting for them. And a choice: peaceful coexistence or facing the full potential of what they handed us. Aboard the Phoenix that evening, Collins stood with Dr. Grant in the observation deck, looking at the stars. The ship hummed with renewed energy, systems, awakening daily as the human crew learned more of its secrets. "You know what I find most interesting?" Grant said. "The Vashnar aren't the first to make this mistake. The precursor records suggest this vessel was captured and discarded multiple times throughout history. Different species found it, couldn't understand it, and passed it along." Collins considered this. Maybe that's the real test. Not whether a species can build advanced technology, but whether they can recognize it when they see it. Whether they have the wisdom to look beyond the surface. As they spoke, new symbols appeared on a nearby wall, pulsing gently. The ship was communicating in its own way, revealing more of itself to the humans who had awakened it. What had been